My brother didn't just ignore me. He laughed when I walked in. I hadn't seen him in years, but the moment our eyes met across the chandelier-lit hall, he threw his head back and laughed, loud, unfiltered, like I was a punchline from a joke no one else remembered. That it was the kind of laugh that slices through conversations, the kind that draws glances, that says more than words ever could. That laugh was deliberate. It wasn't joy. It was dismissal. He turned to the group around him, my mother, my father, my Aunt Lorraine, a few second cousins I barely remembered, and whispered something that made them smirk. No one waved. No one stood. My mother's wine glass hung midair as her eyes met mine, cold and unreadable. Then she took a sip, as if swallowing whatever acknowledgement had almost escaped her lips. The banquet hall reeked of old money and roses. Cream-colored tablecloths hung stiff with starch. The golden chandeliers above flickered against the polished marble floor, while a string quartet murmured soft notes in the corner, lost beneath the sound of champagne flutes clinking and people pretending that I was underdressed. I knew that much. A dark navy dress that had served me well in more solemn occasions. Simple, clean. But here, surrounded by sequins, designer gowns, and hair sprayed to perfection, I may as well have worn a uniform with a name tag. That it was my cousin David's wedding. The family's prodigal son. Med school graduate. Youngest surgeon in the city. Always the pride of our bloodline. My brother called him the real man of the family, loud enough for me to hear when I stepped past their circle toward the back of the room. My name wasn't on the seating chart. Of course not. I had RSVP'd anonymously. They didn't even know I was alive until today. Still working at that coffee shop? Aunt Lorraine asked without turning her head, her voice slipping out with lazy venom as I walked past. I said nothing. I found a chair near the far wall, close to the emergency exit. It wobbled slightly when I sat down. From here I could see everything. The stage where David and his bride would appear, the table where my family basked in curated warmth, and the distance between them and me. That distance wasn't just measured in feet. It stretched years. It stretched back to high school, when I failed my first algebra test and my brother announced over dinner that girls like her don't need math if they're gonna end up waitressing anyway. My father didn't correct him. My mother just sighed and passed the salt. It stretched back to my 18th birthday, when I said I wouldn't be applying to the Ivy Leagues like my brother, and instead planned to work and take night classes. My uncle laughed. She'll be pregnant by 20, he said. She's not built for ambition. And the worst part? I started to believe them. That's the thing about silence. If you hear it enough, you start filling it with what others say you are. And they had no shortage of labels for me. Lazy, slow, invisible, waste. I remembered how they all looked at my brother, Thomas, like he was some sort of divine prototype. Captain of the debate team, scholarships thrown at his feet, that perfect GPA framed on the living room wall like a family heirloom. He never failed to remind me that I was the cautionary tale, the mistake they whispered about when guests left. After high school, I disappeared. No announcement. No party. Just vanished. I packed 2 suitcases, left a note on the kitchen counter. Don't worry. I'll survive. And took a Greyhound to a city 5 hours away. That was over a decade ago. And now here I was again, seated in the shadows of people who once treated me like a ghost, and who now couldn't even muster curiosity about where I'd been. No one asked me how I'd been. No one wanted to know. To them, I never became anything. To them, I was still the failure who never made it past cashier jobs and rent-by-the-week apartments. They didn't see the years I spent working double shifts while studying criminal justice in the back of a laundromat during breaks. They didn't see the nights I came home bruised and exhausted from self-defense training. The early mornings at the firing range, the fear, the fury, the fight I put into building a life no one believed I could have. They saw the same girl who had once cried when her college applications came back rejected. And they never looked past that version. A cheer erupted near the front as the bride's mother walked in. All fake diamonds and real pride. The photographer buzzed around the tables, snapping staged joy and polished smiles. The DJ called for the wedding party to prepare. I stayed in my seat, hands resting lightly on my lap, back straight. I hadn't come to make a scene. I hadn't come to prove anything. I came for a reason, and it wasn't to be seen. Not by them, because soon someone else would walk through those doors. And when they did, none of these people would ever look at me the same again. I still remember the night I left home. It was raining. The kind of rain that drums on your spine like it's trying to keep you from going. But I didn't stop packing. 2 suitcases, 1 notebook, a prepaid phone, and the envelope of cash I had saved from working weekends at Manny's Diner. It wasn't much. Just enough to buy me a bus ticket out of the neighborhood, and maybe a week's worth of meals if I stretched it. No one said goodbye. No one asked why. No one noticed the empty space in my room until maybe a day or 2 later, and even then I doubt they cared. I wasn't the kind of daughter you make missing posters for. I wasn't the kind of sister whose absence left a hole. I was the background noise they never quite tuned out, until suddenly, it was quiet. And they liked it that way. Thomas, my brother, probably laughed. I could hear his voice in my head as the bus pulled away from the station. She finally did something smart, left. That was his specialty. Cruel clarity wrapped in a charming smile. He never lifted a finger to help me, but he made sure everyone knew just how much of a burden I was. At school, at home, in church, I was the cautionary sister. His punching bag dressed up as a sibling. Back then, I used to tell myself I would one day show them who I really was. That I'd become someone they'd regret underestimating. But dreams fade fast when you're scrubbing toilets for minimum wage at night and attending community college lectures during the day, surviving on instant noodles and expired sandwiches donated by the bakery down the street. That I wasn't aiming for revenge. I just wanted to matter. Somewhere, to someone. So I started small. Enrolled in a basic criminal justice class, because it was the only one open that semester. I was the oldest in the room by a few years. Most kids were fresh out of high school, still rolling their eyes at assignments and texting during lectures. I sat in the front row every time. I took notes like my life depended on it. And maybe it did. The professor noticed me. His name was Daniel Carrick, ex-detective, retired early due to a gunshot wound. He walked with a limp, always wore a brown leather jacket even in summer. He asked me once after class why I looked like I'd just come from a war zone. I work, I said. All night. You don't look tired, he said. I don't have time to be. He didn't smile, but he nodded. That was the beginning of everything. Carrick became my mentor. Quietly, without making a show. He slipped me books, recommended training programs. One day, he handed me an application form folded in quarters. It was for a federal internship program. A path into law enforcement I never even knew existed. Don't tell anyone you're applying, he said. Let them be surprised when you're already inside. That became my philosophy for the next decade. I worked. I trained. I learned. On weekends, I took security shifts at construction sites just so I could get experience. I joined a martial arts gym that taught discipline before technique. I ran until my lungs screamed. Studied until my fingers cramped. Ate alone. Slept rarely. No one back home knew. They didn't know when I passed my background check. Didn't know when I was accepted into Quantico. Didn't know the name of the woman who graduated top 5 in her class. Quiet and intense. The one they nicknamed the Ghost because she didn't talk much, just did the work and disappeared. They didn't know I specialized in field analysis and rapid response. Didn't know I'd been deployed in 3 major undercover operations. Didn't know I became section lead for tactical coordination at the Bureau. No one ever thought to ask. The last message I ever got from Thomas was 3 years ago. A text, after some distant relative mentioned they thought they saw me in a photo on the news. LOL. Doubt that's you. FBI doesn't hire waitresses. I didn't respond. I never blocked his number either. That text stayed on my phone like a scar. I looked at it sometimes, on nights I came home after another successful raid, another mission wrapped, another team report signed off with my initials. L. S. Morgan, Section Chief. It didn't feel like revenge. It didn't even feel like triumph. Just survival. Just proof that the girl they discarded didn't disappear. She transformed. And yet, sitting in that corner of the wedding hall, watching the same people who once mocked me laughing like they owned the world, I felt that same flicker of old pain. The part of me that still wondered why they couldn't just be proud. Why they never even tried. I looked around at the perfectly decorated tables, the sterile flowers arranged with cold precision, the champagne towers. They had everything: money, applause, comfort. And none of it made them kind. Then I heard my mother's voice, sharp and low from the main table. If she tries to come up here, just ignore her. I don't want any drama. And Thomas, chuckling, she won't. She never had the guts. There it was again. That laugh. I closed my eyes for a second, steadying my breath. Not because their words hurt, not anymore, but because I felt something shifting in the air. Outside, I heard it. The low hum of black tires rolling across marble. The unmistakable sound of doors opening in sync. The soft echo of polished boots. I didn't need to turn. I knew what was coming. And I knew that, for the first time in their lives, they were about to see me. Not the girl who left, not the sister who failed. They were going to see who I became. And there would be no laughter then. The music shifted to a slower rhythm, the kind reserved for the couple's entrance. Everyone stood. The doors at the far end of the hall opened wide, revealing David and his bride framed by soft white light. The room broke into polite applause and practiced smiles. Cell phones rose. Champagne glasses clinked. I didn't stand. I watched. Their walk was rehearsed, elegant, perfect. The kind of perfection my family loved to showcase. David looked radiant, in control, accomplished, everything I was supposed to never become. His bride, Amanda, clutched his arm like she was holding on to royalty. My mother wiped her eyes with a tissue. My father clapped slowly, solemnly, the way he did after every big moment. Funerals, graduations, victories. I stayed in my chair at the edge, my back straight, heart steady. I wasn't here for this. I could feel the whispers starting again. The side glances. My presence was like a smudge on their canvas, a shadow too stubborn to fade. A few people exchanged hushed comments behind manicured hands. One woman said, "She just showed up? Out of nowhere." Another murmured, "Probably wants money." Someone else whispered, "That's Thomas's sister, right? The one who dropped out or something." My brother turned his head slightly, enough for me to catch the look on his face. Smug disbelief. He raised his glass and mouthed, "Still a ghost." I didn't blink. I just waited. It wasn't long before they handed Thomas the mic. Of course they did. He was the golden one. Always articulate, always poised, always the center of every stage. Even tonight, on someone else's wedding day, he found his spotlight. He walked to the podium with the ease of someone used to being watched. The guests quieted. He adjusted the mic, smiled that politician smile, and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor it is to be here tonight, celebrating my brilliant cousin and his beautiful new bride. David, Amanda. You are a testament to what this family is about. Excellence, loyalty, and commitment. Qualities that, sadly, not everyone values these days." A few people chuckled. My mother looked away, hiding a grin behind her napkin. Thomas continued, pausing for effect. "Now, growing up in this family, we were taught certain things: discipline, ambition, pride. Some of us took those lessons to heart. Others took different paths." His eyes swept the room. They lingered for half a breath too long on me. I said nothing, But I felt the heat rising under my skin, not from shame, from something else. The familiar feeling that always came before a mission briefing. Anticipation that he was baiting me, that he wanted me to crack. To storm out. To confirm every belief they ever held about me. But I wasn't here to play his game. That he finished his speech with a toast. To those who strive for greatness, and to those who watch from the sidelines. Applause, laughter. And then silence. It didn't happen immediately. It crept in like a tide, pulling back, slow and subtle. First, it was the sound outside. The absence of traffic, of ambient noise, of the ever-present hum of the city. Then came the soft commotion at the entrance. A waiter paused mid-step, eyes locked on the doors. A child tugged at his mother's arm. "Mom, look!" And then they entered. Two men in dark suits, identical in posture and pace, walked swiftly into the hall. They weren't part of the catering team. They weren't guests. Their presence was too controlled, too silent, too intentional. Their eyes scanned the room with clinical precision. The room, full of gold and glitter, suddenly felt cold. Whispers began. Someone asked, "Are those Secret Service?" Another, "What's going on?" The men stopped halfway into the hall, stood firm and waited. Then came the third figure, the one who made the entire room hold its breath. She walked in wearing tactical black, tailored, sharp, clean. Her hair was pulled back, her badge clipped to her belt, and a comm device fitted snugly in her ear. Her boots made no sound on the marble floor, yet her presence was thunder. She looked like she didn't belong at a wedding, because she didn't. She belonged in war rooms, on the field, in briefings that shaped national strategy. And she walked straight toward me. Every head turned. Every eye followed. I stood slowly, instinctively, my body already reacting before my thoughts caught up. I hadn't seen her in person in months. We worked different divisions now, but I recognized her immediately. She stopped 3 feet from me, nodded, then turned to the room and said, clear and calm, "Ma'am, the ops team is waiting outside. They need your decision before deployment." Silence. Absolute, unmovable silence. It fell over the room like a bomb had dropped, like glass had shattered. "Ma'am? The ops team? Deployment?" I felt the collective intake of breath around me, the confusion, the slow unraveling of every assumption, every lie they'd told themselves about who I was. Thomas's face drained of color. My mother dropped her glass. My father looked as if someone had just punched him. And then came the question, the one that broke the illusion completely. The agent turned back to me and said, louder this time, "Section Chief Morgan, your orders?" My name. My title spoken like a declaration. The moment I answered, there would be no going back. So I didn't speak right away. I looked around the room, at the faces I once begged to see me, at the eyes that never looked twice. My brother's jaw was tight, his fists clenched. For the first time in his life, he was speechless. I turned to the agent, voice steady, low. "Tell them to proceed with protocol." Echo. "I'll join them in 10. She nodded once and stepped back. Then, for the first time that night, I walked forward, not toward the stage, not toward my family, but through them. Through the silence they had built around me, the wall of laughter and shame they'd constructed my entire life. And now there were no jokes and no taunts. Only stunned silence. I passed Thomas. He didn't move. I met his eyes, and he finally saw me. Not the girl he mocked. Not the waitress he dismissed. He saw me, Section Chief L.S. Morgan, the sister he lost, and the woman he never had the right to laugh at again. My heels echoed on the marble like gunshots in the silence. The same hall that moments ago had pulsed with artificial joy and forced celebration now held its breath. Faces froze mid-smile. Champagne was forgotten in trembling hands. My name, my title, still lingered in the air like a dropped match in a room full of dry paper. I kept walking. Not fast. Not slow. Just with certainty. The kind I had earned. Every eye followed me as I made my way to the front, cutting through the stunned crowd, the crystal chandeliers casting sharp patterns on my black suit. My badge caught the light, not flashed for theatrics, but worn plainly, truthfully. It was real, tangible, not a costume, not a fantasy. Behind me, the agent followed, silent, standing guard. The other two flanked the exit, their posture neutral but alert. Protocol. This wasn't a mission, not officially. But even in moments like these, especially in moments like these, procedure mattered. Security always matters. At the center table, my family sat frozen. My mother, always so composed, looked pale, her mouth slightly open like she'd forgotten how to breathe. My father was gripping his napkin so tightly it looked like he'd tear through it. My Aunt Lorraine had stopped fanning herself. David, the groom, was completely still, one arm around his bride, the other resting on the edge of the table as if preparing to stand. And Thomas didn't blink, his eyes locked on mine the entire time. The same eyes that used to roll at me across dinner tables, that used to narrow when I'd say something too ambitious, too smart for someone like me. The same eyes that laughed before his mouth did, before the words even came out. Those eyes were now wide with disbelief and fear. Not because I was dangerous. I wasn't here for that. But because I had become undeniable. Section Chief Morgan, the agent beside me said again, quieter this time. We have confirmation that Unit 7 is en route. They'll await your directives by the north perimeter. Your vehicle is secure. I nodded once. Understood. Stand by outside. I'll join shortly. Yes, ma'am. The agent turned and left. Clean, efficient, professional. Still, I remained in place for a moment longer. And then, I spoke, loud enough for the whole room to hear. I didn't come here for anyone's approval. The silence deepened. I came here because for years you told the story of who I was. You called me weak, lazy, a mistake. No one dared move. You said I'd never become anything, that I'd always be a burden, that girls like me, invisible ones, disappear. I turned to look directly at Thomas now. You made a career out of laughing at me. Every step I took, every time I tried to grow, you were there to remind me I wasn't enough. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. You never asked where I went after I left. Never asked what I did. Not once. Then I turned back to the room. But while you were celebrating each other, building resumes out of privilege and applause, I was building something too, quietly, without needing your permission. There was movement near the doors now. Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their eyes. I walked slowly to the side of the table where my mother sat. She couldn't even look at me. She had always been so obsessed with appearances. She taught me how to sit like a lady, how to dress like someone who belonged at events like this. But she never taught me how to fight back when someone told me I didn't matter. I learned that part alone. Mom, I said quietly, you once told me that people like me don't get far in life. That ambition doesn't fit girls who can't follow rules. Her fingers trembled on her wine glass. I followed rules, I said. Better than anyone. Then I looked to Thomas again. And I broke them too, the right ones. The ones meant to keep me small. Thomas finally stood. It was clumsy. Awkward. Like he was trying to reclaim control of something he never had. I didn't know, he said. Okay? I didn't know you. You didn't want to know. I cut in, my voice firm level. You didn't care. He looked like he wanted to protest, but there was nothing he could say now that wouldn't sound pathetic. Every guest was watching. Everyone could see what he couldn't hide anymore. The mask had cracked. I stepped back, letting the silence speak again. Then I turned to David, the groom. His face was unreadable. Shock, confusion, something else. Maybe shame. He hadn't mocked me like the others, not directly. But he had ignored me. That was worse in some ways. To the bride and groom, I said, I wish you the best. Truly. You deserve a better memory of this day than the one sitting beside you. Amanda opened her mouth, but said nothing. And finally, I walked toward the exit. That MY badge glinted once more as I passed the stunned faces. All those relatives who had spoken behind my back, who had written me off, who now whispered in panic, "She's in the FBI? She's a section chief? What the hell is happening?" I didn't answer any of it. As I reached the doors, one of the guards opened it for me. Before stepping out, I glanced over my shoulder one last time and said with quiet steel, "I never needed to prove anything to you, but it feels good knowing I did." Then I left. The night air hit me like a breath of truth. The city felt cleaner somehow. Sharper. A black vehicle idled at the curb, back door open. Inside, my team waited. Not friends, not family, but people who had seen me, trusted me, followed me when it counted. I got in. The door closed behind me. And as the wedding hall faded into the distance, I felt the weight of the past loosen its grip. Because tonight, I didn't just reclaim my story. I buried theirs. The hum of the engine was soft, steady, like a heartbeat in recovery. I sat in the back seat of the bureau vehicle, flanked by tinted windows in silence. Not the hollow kind I grew up with, but the earned kind. The kind that comes after storms, when nothing else needs to be said. My eyes stared out into the dark streets of the city, headlights streaking past in ghostly ribbons. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt something more. But all I felt was stillness. The kind that settles in your bones when the war is over. Not one, just over. My comms device buzzed gently in my ear. "Ops team in position," said a voice I knew well. Collins, my second in command. Awaiting further instructions. "Are we a go?" I paused, then answered. "Proceed with standard sweep. No red flags. Debrief when I arrive." "Copy that. See you soon, Chief." I tapped the comm off and leaned back, eyes still fixed on the blur outside the window. The driver didn't speak. He knew better. These were the moments that belonged to thought, not noise. I replayed the scene in my mind, not to bask in it, but because part of me still didn't believe it had happened. The wedding, the glances, the speech, the agent calling my name, the silence that swallowed the entire room the moment they heard who I was. I hadn't planned on making a scene. In fact, I told myself I wouldn't speak. I was just going to walk in, be seen, and walk out. But something shifted when Thomas raised that glass and said those words, when he toasted to greatness and those who watch from the sidelines. He thought he was safe in that joke. Thought the story he'd crafted about me, the dropout, the invisible, the burden, would live forever without challenge. He didn't know the truth was coming, and that the truth would wear a badge. But now that it had happened, now that I had been seen, I didn't feel the glow I thought I would. I didn't feel bigger. I didn't feel avenged. I just felt tired. Because recognition that comes too late doesn't heal the wounds it should. It just shows you how deep they really go. My mother's face haunted me the most. Not because she cried. Not because she looked disappointed. But because even in that moment, even with the truth shining right in her face, she still couldn't look me in the eye. That hurt more than all of it. She hadn't changed. None of them had. What changed was me. I had stopped needing their approval somewhere along the way. I just hadn't realized it until tonight. The driver pulled up to the operations hub, a modest, nondescript building camouflaged in a business park. Inside, a team of 12 agents waited for my direction. Professionals. Warriors. Every one of them trusted me with their lives. Every one of them called me chief without hesitation. They didn't care about my past. They only cared that I delivered. And I always did. As I stepped inside, Collins handed me a tablet with a fresh report. Scan sweep came back clean. No anomalies. Local PD is handling crowd control. Good, I said, signing off on the screen. Send the wrap-up to regional. Let's close it. Collins studied me for a moment. You okay? I met his eyes. He'd been with me long enough to know when I wasn't. I'm fine, I said. He nodded, but he didn't believe me. You want me to cover your next shift? No, I said. I want to work. He gave a small smile and stepped back. That was another difference between this world and the one I left behind. Here, when someone offered you help, it wasn't because they thought you were weak. It was because they respected how strong you'd been for so long. When the debrief was finished and the team dismissed, I stayed in the briefing room alone. Lights dimmed. One chair. One desk. One breath that I pulled my phone out of my pocket and scrolled to the oldest saved message. Thomas, 3 years ago. LOL. Doubt that's you. FBI doesn't hire waitresses. I stared at it for a long moment and I thought about deleting it. But I didn't. I needed it to stay, not as a wound, but as a marker. A timestamp on the moment they stopped knowing me. I locked the phone and placed it on the desk. And then I let myself feel it. Not pride. Not grief. Just the weight of survival, because that's what people never understand about those of us who were left behind, who were told we were less, who were laughed at behind closed doors. Survival doesn't come with applause. Comes with scars. Comes with silence. It comes with 1,000 quiet choices to keep going even when no one sees you. And sometimes, even when they do finally see you, it's too late. Because they're looking at a version of you that no longer needs them. That they're realizing you're not waiting at the door anymore. You built your own, and locked it behind you. Later that night, when I finally got home, a small but clean apartment overlooking the city skyline, I stood by the window, sipping tea, watching the lights flicker across the buildings. And then my phone buzzed. One new message from an unknown number. I didn't know you were doing all that. I guess I was wrong. You look good up there. Sorry for how I treated you. Thomas, I stared at it. Not angry. Not moved. Just still. That I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Apologies that come after the crowd has left are just echoes. They don't rebuild anything. They just bounce around in the hollow spaces people leave when they abandon you. I closed the message, set the phone down, and turned off the lights. The city outside glowed on. And for the first time in years I felt peace. Not because they saw me, but because I no longer cared if they did. That night my brother finally looked me in the eyes. But it was already too late.